Hey everybody, welcome to Love and Reload, the voice of the relocation industry. I am your host, Ben Cross, and I'm so blessed and honored to be here today with my friend Chris Kline, growth and transformation leader at Orion Mobility and author of the new book, Unpacking Employee Relocation. Chris Kline, how are you doing?
Good, Ben. Glad to be on the show today.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you here, and you got a book here going on. I mean, you got a lot cooking here. I'm excited to get into it. I'm going to ask everybody who's watching out there, hit that like button, get into the comments. I want to hear from you. Have you ever read a book about our industry? Get in the comments here if you have a favorite or one that you've read. Super curious because I think that we all feel like we're existing on an island and we're doing this weird funky thing that nobody understands at cocktail parties and our family doesn't care about, and even sometimes in our own organizations, if we're a corporate, nobody knows what we do. And here you've gone and written a book about it. Chris, before we get into what the book's about, I got to ask you, what possessed you to write a book about employee relocation?
So I've been in this space now about almost 4 decades. So I think 37 years was the last time
It's a
accounting
lot of
started.
material.
Yeah, started on the moving side, worked my way up in the moving and got into employee relocation. And I worked in sales. I worked with salespeople for most of my career. And really, there's two types of salespeople, right? There's salespeople that are out there that are all about the hunt, they're all about the commissions. And there's other salespeople that they just serve. They're in the business to serve, to fix problems. And again, even before getting into Relo, I was an engineer. So I was very fixated on fixing problems, fixing situations. And to be honest with you, the industry as a whole, I think, is broken today. And the book is an attempt to try to put a microphone out there for everybody to contribute and get through longstanding traditions and practices and improve the program. So I think this book is the first part of starting on that journey.
Love it. So the audience for this book is who?
It's geared toward multiple audiences. I think the primary audience is going to be that corporate representative who is fighting battles every day, defending what they do, how they do it, why they do it. I think that's the primary audience, but I think it's also a textbook or a masterclass for people that serve those customers, whether you're in the moving space, temporary living, real estate, whatever it may be. If you're an RMC, I think it kind of starts that conversation, that uncomfortable dinner conversation about how the industry is built.
Super interesting. I look forward to hearing more about it. Get in the comments right now if you're out there watching us. I want to hear from you. Hit that like button. We're going to be talking about Chris's new book, Unpacking Employee Relocation. We're going to be talking about what does that mean? What is in it? I love the pun, unpacking. I know Rob Zeitz out there is going to love the pun too. He says, hello from Wicked Smart, Cambridge, Mass. Love the book title. I knew you would, Rob. This guy's our pun laureate here on the show. Get in the comments here. Brian Smith checking in. Hey, Chris and Ben.
Good to see you, Brian.
Hear from Brian. Sammy, super producer Samara checking in here. Congratulations on your new book, Chris. So nice to have you on the show today. I got to ask you, I've always aspired to write a book. I always wanted to do it. I don't know what I would write it about. I have a couple ideas, but the actual process of writing a book, I mean, it's one thing to say, oh, I got an idea for a book. I mean, everyone has an idea, I feel like. But to actually execute it, I mean, what did you learn through that process?
So I had thought about writing a book for the last 5 years. I mean, it's been on my mind, and I've probably written the book in my mind a million times. Like, what would I say? How would I say it? What would I try to communicate? What would the book be of writing the book? And the way I started is being in sales. I've done individual presentations, either training or pitches to customers, whatever it may be, where I talked about tax protected home sale programs or house so good moving tariffs or tax law. And what I did is I just really assembled a bunch of different presentations that I've given throughout my career and put it into a format or an outline. I actually wrote the book between the day after Christmas and New Year's Day. My goal was to get the book written in that period between the holidays. I missed it by a day. I actually had it finished on the second. And I think the first version, it was just under 200 pages. And then that's where I started working with an editor, and then we rearranged the book and we orchestrated a little bit more because, again, I just, when you tell a story, you talk, and that's what I did within the book. So she helped me just kind of organize my thoughts. I had a bunch of case studies that I wanted to work with. Only half of them made it to the book. Some of them, she just felt, hey, these are great case studies, maybe for your second book, but for the first one, let's keep it really focused. And she helped me design it in a way that it follows a relocation. So what happens in a relocation at the beginning, what happens throughout, and then what are the different components throughout a relocation? So it took,
Wow.
so I would have gotten it to her on January 2nd. We then went through a 3-month, so January, February, March, went through an editing process. And then I had the final draft early April, and then moved on to getting it set up with Amazon and doing the book cover, getting it designed.
So interesting. So the actual process of writing, the process of editing took like maybe 10 times longer than it took to actually write the thing, it sounds like.
Absolutely, plenty of rewrites. She says, you're not saying this right. Try again. There's a thing we also wanted the book to be a reference. So I took it as telling stories, but she would say, like, Chris, you should have a checklist at the end of every chapter. So if you were talking directly to the customer, what would you ask them to ask themselves about their program? So that went into the book. So again, it's a resource guide for the reader.
Yeah, really interesting. Get in the comments here if you've thought about writing a book, if you've got questions about that process, or if you have, any kinds of other questions for Chris about this. I'm fascinated by this process myself. People are checking in left and right here. Hit that like button, y'all. Appreciate you. I see you out there. Daisy Sinclair, congrats on the book. Daisy, if you
Terry,
wrote a book, what would you write? Terry Culver, hi, Chris, congrats. Cynthia over here checking. Great topic. I can't wait to hear all about the book. Nice job, Chris. I got a question. I'm going to ask everybody this. Get in the comments, okay? Sammy, you too. Okay. If you were going to write a book, what would it be about? It doesn't have to be, listen, this is the first draft. Just give me an idea. Just give me a topic. Just give me maybe it's about lasagna. Maybe it's about household goods moving. I'm really curious. Like, you ever have an unction to write a book? What would it be about, Jillian might be about, Connecticut or something, whatever it is. UConn basketball. I don't know. Rob Zeitz, a book title suggestion for Ben. Been there, done that. Life at the crossroads of global mobility and relocation. Is it a memoir, Rob? Super interesting. Rob's hilarious. Karen Gerba. Hi, guys. What's up, Karen? Good to see you. Mike Falia checking in. Sunny SoCal. Daisy's thinking about the book. I'm not going to hold you to it, okay, Daisy? You don't got to go out and write a book right now. Let me ask you this, Kristen. We're going to get into kind of the meat and potatoes of the book, but I'm so fascinated by the process of it. How much did it change from your first iteration over a course of a week over the holidays to actually coming out this May?
So when you've been to enough conferences and you've been to enough bars at the conferences over time.
I've been to a couple of bars. I mean, don't go spreading malicious rumors about me, Chris, but I've been to a couple of bars. Sure, sue me.
And depending on how late it goes in the evening, there's always stories about that move, about that real estate transaction.
That's the whole reason I started this podcast, is because the stories at the bar were just so good. I was like, I got to bring the conference to the cubicle, but go ahead.
So it started with some of those stories. And I think from there, it was going to be more of just, hey, this is a funny story about global mobility. And then when I got into it, I thought, this needs to be more of a resource. This needs to be more of an educational piece that can not only share, because there's a lot of case studies in the book, but not only what the case studies are, but a master class in what do you do if you want to change your tax gross up, or you want to change your policy, or you want to do more or less for your employee. So that's where the book really changed from really more of a story to a resource guide, more of a textbook.
Okay, interesting, super interesting. Margot Wetzel checking in. Hey, Ben from Florida. Oh, hey, where in the world are you right now, Chris?
I'm in Tampa.
Nice, love Tampa. I lived in Hillsborough and Pinellas County for 6 years. Mike Falia said the title of my book would be You Said You'd Volunteer, Now What? It's about how to volunteer in your community and make a difference. Yeah, that's great. Let's see here. Karen Gerber says How to Build Relationships that Become Long-Term Clients would be the book she would write. I thought about writing a book that's a compilation of all of my apology letters to customers. So I worked for a movie company. We were not very good at what we did for a while, okay? And I found myself every summer writing the most gorgeous apology notes to these customers, emails and stuff, and to my clients and to the RMC and whatever. And it would be like a coffee table book of funny apology, emails or something like that I've written. Anyway. Margot Wetzel, we are neighbors with Chris. Yes, Very cool. So in doing this, in writing this book, what's the major theme that you're trying to convey? Well, before we go into that, when does the book come out and how can people get it?
Comes out live May 12th. It's being released in time for the FEM conference in Dallas, which I'm going to be at. And well, Ben, you're going to be there, so I look forward to seeing you then.
Welcome.
It's the release date for the paperback is the 12th. The ebook is on Amazon now. It can be pre-ordered. It will be released on the 12th as well. Also, there's a ridiculous price right now on the pre-order. So if you're interested in buying it from an ebook, order now, because that price is not going to last.
Okay.
On Amazon.
Nice. So go on Amazon but can you pre-order it now? You can, but it won't ship until May 12th. Is that the idea?
You can pre-order the ebook. They don't allow pre-shipping of the paperback. So the paperback order goes live on the 12th.
Okay. Super cool. Are you going to bring some of the books to the conference?
I'm working on it now.
And maybe do like a signing, maybe a book signing or something?
Yeah, the first one made out to Ben.
Hey, all right, there we go. I like it. I always not that it's practical, but I would always like to buy the book from the author, because I feel like there's so many people taking a cut along the way. It's like if I can give you my 20, 30 bucks, whatever the number is, right? Cash money, and just I just feel there's something organic about that, and you could sign it, I can give you some cash, I can walk away with a memento. I don't know. I just like that idea. Brian Smith says, how about a coffee table book about coffee tables? It's very meta. Is that Seinfeld or something? That's great. Margot says her book would be how to position global mobility with Corp so we become finally heard and have a seat at the table. Margot, I think that's fantastic. You talk a lot, Chris, about mobility being kind of a strategic lever within an organization, not just the support function. Can you kind of expound on what that means for companies?
Yeah, I've moved 14 times, and most of those 14 moves were for a job, right? It was a promotion. It was a new company that I was going to work for. And I don't think a lot of people on the corporate level really understand the sacrifice that employees make when they relocate. I think it's one of those things that, hey, you're getting a new job, you're getting a new position, you should be happy you have a job, you should be happy you have a position. But they really don't get, again, I like to use the word, what a patriot they are. Because they're doing the ultimate, right? They're going to work at a corporate headquarters where a lot of people at that headquarters have grown up in that city. They live in that city. I think about one of the posts, you put a post out there and you said, why is it so hard to get people in the relocation business to relocate? It is.
Yes.
And you didn't get a lot of reactions to that.
No, nobody wants to say anything about it. But the truth is, relo don't relo. We don't eat our own dog food, and I want to know why.
Right. So then when you start looking at, you're asking a person to join a new company, you're asking a person to relocate, you're asking their family to relocate. Now, I can tell you, every time I got offered a relocation, it was normally tied to an awesome job. And it was like, hey, that's all I could really think about. Hopefully my family would be excited in where they were going. And some of the moves were great. Some of the moves were not so great. But it was about, moving on your career. And I think that a lot of people within organizations look at it as just any other benefit like healthcare or anything else. And they don't realize that this is your brand.
I wasn't raising my hand. My AI powered camera saw these ladies talking on the TV, and it got attached to them. So it always likes the ladies more than me. But whatever. What are you gonna do? Yeah, I think you bring up some really good points, though. I think I want to talk a little bit more about why relo don't relo, as I like to say. Margot says, but can we gift your book to our leaders?
It's written for the C-suite as well. Absolutely.
Very good. Okay. Yeah. I want to unpack that, though. You mentioned moving several times for work, for a great job. I also have relocated for work at least 3 times where it was sponsored by the company in progressively better packages. Why do you think, if you were to hazard a guess, that there is such an aversion to managed relocation within the managed relocation industry for our own employees?
I had a polished answer for this, so I'm going to give you the real answer. The real answer is relocation absolutely sucks. I don't care what anybody. I mean, remember the old U-Haul, moving is an adventure.
Yeah.
I moved enough. I don't want an adventure.
Yeah.
I want
I,
peace. I want
I'm
life.
too old for this shit. I don't need another adventure.
So you're in the business. You've heard all the horror stories. You've seen all the train wrecks. And again, it's not so much about the
Truck
service.
wrecks.
I had exceptional moves. I mean, shout out to Terry Culver. My best move that I've ever had. She actually helped coordinate that move. She came out to my house and did the survey. She
Nice,
actually got
Terry.
the weight right. And again, I had a driver of the year that handled my household good shipment. And when I talk about a lever and a brand, I can't tell you the volumes that spoke to me. That not only did they give me a great package, but they had the driver of the year was the person that came and picked up my household shipment. That said a lot. And I talk about this in the book about what that relocation was in 2004. In 2004 dollars, I'm sorry, in 2025 dollars, that move would have been over $250,000
Holy
because
smokes.
tax law changes, the changes in real estate, and this is not a rich policy.
Was there a home sale benefit attached to it?
There's a BVO program. There was a benefit on the buy side purchasing. There was your standard, 60 days of temporary living, and again, moving your household goods, gross up, everything associated with. But in today's dollars, it would be $250,000 because of the tax law changes and inflation.
Yeah. Super interesting. Well, and that's the rich, I think the richness of or the expense, I should say, the cost of relocation is one of the things that folks kind of scoff at, in our industry. And the only folks that I see doing relocations, we talk to people all the time. We have a big recruitment business, right? So we're talking to hiring managers all the time. And the last question we ask when we do the intake for the job requisition is, would you be willing to relocate a candidate for this position? The only segment that says yes almost every time is the moving business. The movers are like, yeah, sure. No, if we have to, yeah, sure, no problem. And like, yeah, I'm sure I'll have a truck. I'll have a truck over there. I can go get them, but everybody else is just like, no. And to me, that signals, if you're selling something but you're not willing to buy it, to me, that signals you don't believe in it. And I think that when we talk about how we're commoditized in this business, and we talk about how our clients view us with a degree of sameness, and we can't differentiate ourselves, and we're struggling with our value proposition in the C-suite and getting a seat at the table and being in the room where it happens and all the Hamilton songs. My point is, I think that we don't buy it ourselves sometimes. And that really is the thing that breaks my heart, I think. Because to your point, I've been that executive that's gotten that move. My wife is addicted to a full pack. She told me, she's like, I'm not ever moving again unless I get a full pack move. Once you go full pack, you never go back. That's what my wife says. So it is a real benefit, and it makes your people feel like they're VIPs. It gets them to work, that much faster without the headaches and the thought of, oh my gosh, I have to deal with all this stuff that's just becomes debilitating. It's like when your hard drive has no available memory and it just locks up on you. That's what your brain feels like when you're going through a relocation. But you're right, we're so distanced from it because we never do it ourselves anymore. So the employees that are going through it are just a file. They're just a number. They're just a complaining customer because their bed's not here on time or their crib's missing a screw or whatever. And I just think we got to get back to it. And if we're not doing it to ourselves and for ourselves, how are we ever really going to innovate? And how are we ever really going to know the value of what we're selling out there?
In the book, there's an entire chapter that's dedicated to household goods, just a little bit about the industry, the genesis, where it came from, and how it got started, and really the differentiation between agents and van lines, right? A lot of people think, well, it's the van line I'm dealing with. No, it's really not the van line you're dealing with. But the movers, the agents, are probably the best at knowing the talent locally, right? I mean, they know the other people in the community. They know the up and comers. They know the competition. They know who's good. They know who's available, and they know right away whether they've got local talent or not, which is why they're probably more open to recruiting because they've exhausted that search locally.
You know, that's a really great point, right? Because the other thing movers do is they don't like to train new people. They want to hire people that have moving experience. And you're
Mhm.
right. They know the other dozen movers in town and they've already hired, you know, half their people or been hired from, you know, so it's a kind of an incestuous little talent pool. And by the time they come to us, they've already, you know, called around and checked locally. You're absolutely correct. And I mean, we were talking to one yesterday, a guy that's owned a moving company for 39 years. And he's like, yeah, we know that we probably are going to need to go outside our market because we're not really satisfied with what's here. You know, we need somebody that's going to take us to the next level as an organization, the next generation of talent. So it's really interesting. I hope that trend changes. I've seen some RMCs recently that have hired some senior executives and have actually moved them kind of in this whole return to office trend that we've been seeing. So that's exciting. So I've seen, Paul DeBoer joined GMS and they're relocating him to Phoenix. I've seen, Chris Lagerman joined CRI. They're relocating him, they relocated him to Dallas. So I have hope yet, but I'd like to see that trend change a little bit, you know. You talk about transparency in the
Mhm.
book and in your posts and things. Talk to me about where we are from a transparency standpoint and where you think we need to be as an industry.
I think that our industry as a whole has gotten extremely complicated in its messaging, its marketing, its contracting, its implementation, and its execution. And with all of that being some mouthful right there, in fact, I could write a book just based on that. You lose transparency when you go through all of that. So customers, they don't understand the complex relationships. And Steve John was on your show a couple of weeks ago, and he talked about transparency a lot. He talked about the role of different providers along within the supply chain and those responsible for managing the supply chain. But there's some complex relationships. I mean, just when you pick your management company, they're now picking your realtors. And with the settlement, those commissions they've always been negotiable, by the way, but now legally, I guess they're truly negotiable. So you're going to go with an RMC that negotiates their own commissions. Is that a good thing or not? You might be okay with that. An RMC that's owned by a moving company. What tariffs, what competition, what performance metrics, what pricing are you using? An independent, you don't have any ties. It's fun. It's absolutely fantastic that you don't have any ties and you truly are independent. But how do you make your money? And are you willing to disclose that? There are some RMCs out there that are waking up to this. They're being more transparent about their revenue. There's one that Steve had talked about when he was on the show. He said, "Look, we do management fees. We don't take escrows from moving companies or whatever." So I think it's starting, but it's nowhere near. And it's not just the RMCs. It's the temporary living providers. It's the movers. It's everybody in the supply chain.
Yeah, so I'm of two minds here, right, Chris? Like, on the one hand, as a consumer, I say I want transparency, except I eat a lot of sausage and I don't want to know how it's made,
Right.
And on the other side, as a business owner, I know one of the sayings, I coin a lot of phrases, Chris, I want to keep repeating them until they become, a thing. But I say the margins in the mystery, so if customers knew how to do what we did, they wouldn't pay us so much to do it. So when we pull back the curtain and we start bringing transparency in, the fear for businesses out there is, well, gosh, I'm going to lose pricing power. I'm going to further fuel the commoditization of what I do, and profit is going to leave my business, and it becomes a circle of the drain. You start to circle the drain. Is that a legitimate fear though, Chris, for the industry?
No, the industry is going to change, and it's going to. The consumers are going to drive change. The reality about relocation today is it's too expensive. It's way too expensive, and it doesn't have to be that expensive. There's opportunities out there to protect the margins of the suppliers. And again, there's a confusion of the word, protecting margins while you're being transparent. And can you do both of those? And the answer is absolutely yes. You can do both. In fact, there's one supplier that I worked with in the past is on the temporary living side, and they would be, I'll call them a consolidator of temporary living. Instead of doing a referral based concept or commission based concept, they charge a fee for every transaction. So the client knows is that, when you go on their platform and you work with them and you use ABC corporate housing, they're going to pay a fee, but they're going to get the direct cost associated with that temporary living. So if I use temporary living as an example, the biggest driver of temporary living is not the price of the unit. It's the availability of the unit. So if you can find the unit and it's available and you're dealing directly with the landlord through your arranger of temporary housing, you're going to pay a much better price. Household goods, big moving van going into storage, or put it into a container and store the container. Much cheaper to put in a container and move the container. And those are higher. My understanding is they're much higher margins. So again, transparency and margins, you can do both.
Yeah, interesting. Really interesting. Get in the comments here. I want to know what you think out there. You got questions for Chris. You know, what are your thoughts around transparency? What are your thoughts around kind of the state of the industry here? Let's see what we got. Margot says, what transparency? Jack says they want transparency to know that they are taken advantage of. Yeah, Jack, and then what? Rob says in the book we need to include a dictionary of mobility acronyms and jargon. That's a whole book, like a mobility dictionary, and yeah, or just acronym, bot, widget. Karen says my husband had 3 sponsored corporate moves with Boise, Cascade, got everything, and no one got everything. And one move, he got temp living for 6 months, a buy down mortgage, home closing costs, BVO, bonus, 2 house hunting trips, 1 month miscellaneous allowance, and every other thing you can get in household goods, 20,000 pound plus gross up. Now you're just bragging, Karen, okay? This was in 2005, 2006. I can't imagine what it would cost today, Chris. Chris, you want to hazard a guess what that would cost in the year I graduated college?
Well, I'll use the example. So if I said that my move was $250,000 in 2004 dollars, that move did not exceed. It was under 100,000. I think it was 96 grand was the total move. So since 2004 to 2025, it's gone from under 100 to 250,000.
Yeah, I think that buy down mortgage is kind of questionable. I don't know, and of course the size of the home that you're closing on is kind of a question. Man, that's a rich policy, Karen. Good night. That's a nice policy. They don't make them like that anymore. Why don't they make them like that anymore, Chris?
Some companies do. Some companies will still offer that. I mean, I'm looking at what Karen got. That's what used to be considered a mid-level homeowner policy. Yeah. That's what I would see consistently.
Are there certain industries where that's still the norm? I mean, I hear, my folks that go to BAM all the time on the West Coast, right? They're like, yeah, we got some great logos out here, but nobody's moving anything. What I hear from different RMCs and such is the Midwest, the middle of the country is where they're calling on, because that's where manufacturing bases are. That's where oil and gas and that's where you need people, boots on the ground, doing things, physically present, and therefore that's where the relocation volumes are. What are you thinking about the business mix and how things are changing? Is this business really viable? Where's the money at in this business?
So if I was to write the next book, it would be branding your relocation program, and it would be geared towards corporate clients. When you look at, and by the way, we're putting together a corporate roundtable in June in New York City, and it's going to be ROI, all geared towards mobility, right? Because one of the biggest misalignments that corporate customers have is, what is the ROI? I mean, you look at Karen's package, you look at my package that I got to move, where it would be $250,000 today. I was running $100 million division. And that $100 million division was going to be determined by what happened with the $10 million division. So, what was the company willing to spend to get somebody to help them grow their company? And that's why they were willing to take make the investment and bring me on board. So I think when you evaluate where a company invests in relocation, you also have to look at what the whole package looks like. I mean, when you look at Silicon Valley, you look at high tech, they don't pay a lot for relocation because you're getting stock grants, you're getting options. And you're taking that job because maybe you're going to work for the next Amazon or the next, whatever, the next Tesla. So they don't have to spend a lot of money. However, where a lot of companies get it wrong.
No, that's a good point. I want to hop in there real quick, right? Because you're right. Yeah. The expectation of how long you stay with a company has changed dramatically. It used to be 10, 20, 30 years with a company. Now you're with the company 5 years, you feel like, you kind of done your job and you can move on now. So before the company was investing in the career of the person and the loyalty of the person, and the fact that that person knew that, hey, if I get on the company ladder here, it may require me going all over the world to do the job, right? To be a patriot for this
Right.
company, as you use the words, right? But I know I'm going to be taken care of, and I know, I don't have to worry about, will I want to take the next assignment, because I know I'm going to be well taken care of each step of the way. And now I don't know that that compact with the employee is the same as it used to be. Things are a lot more transactional now with employment. I mean, down to the fact that you look at how many contractors, 1099 people, gig workers, consultants, et cetera, comprise the workforce now. And it's no wonder that companies are utilizing cash payments and lump sum payments in lieu of managed relocation and white glove service.
So I'm one of the few. I don't blast lump sums. I think lump sums have a place. What I blast
Mm-hmm.
is lump sums without support, right? So if you're going to work for a high tech company and you're being offered stock, I mean, my son-in-law is in tech, and he I think he got $2,500 to move from Miami to Tampa, and which is a horrible lump sum, a horrible relocation package. But he was also given stock that was eventually became worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. So when you look at that, you have to wonder, what's the draw? And you look at certain industries in the Midwest or whatever, they don't have the stock draw. They don't have that upside, or they don't have, maybe they have the career advancement, but the market's a tougher sell. I don't know. But
Yeah.
lump sums without support, and these are minimal invest. Again, in the book, there's an entire chapter on destination services. It doesn't cost a lot of money, and most companies don't do it because they look at it and say, well, the employee can just go to Google or they can go to the internet. And it's like, I don't know that I would take a relocation based on what I found on the internet.
Well, and it sounds good. You can go to the internet because presumably everything's there. But until you're standing in line at the DMV or at the consulate or wherever, and you're facing, okay, am I going to be compliant? Am I going to be legal in this country? Am I going to be allowed to stay here? Am I going to be? I mean, I just went to the DMV recently, Chris, and I barely made it through. Like I didn't have a hard copy of my registration. I thought a sticker would suffice. And I went on the internet several times. I was born in this state. Okay. It's my fourth go round living in the state of Texas. Okay. And I almost did not get my license. And so and you're nervous the whole time. And I can't imagine being from another country and going through that, or where English wasn't my first language going through that, or never setting foot in Texas and being freaked out, because I'm in a new place culturally or whatever. And I think you're so right. But it's one of those things, until you go through it, you won't really know what it
Right.
feels like. And going back to kind of the beginning, it's like, if we're not relocating as an industry personally, everything we're selling is theoretical.
Mhm.
Hey, let's check in here. We got some people in the comments here. Hit that like button. I want to know what you think. Am I crazy? What do you think here? Karen was saying her husband was a GM. Karen, I'm going to ask you a loaded question. Did he pay for himself with that relocation, that $250,000 relocation? We talk about, $100 million business unit, but that's top line numbers, right? I mean, at the end of the day, they got to make money, right? You see, some companies are in the red, not Apple. Apple's doing fine. Don't cry for Apple. But we're talking bottom line dollars we're spending on these relocations. I think that's also a common misconception that a lot of employees don't necessarily understand. Not saying you, but employees don't understand. Yeah, no one wants to move to the middle of nowhere. Margot says, that's super interesting too. Wants to move to the middle of nowhere. There's two things in that phrase that I want to unpack that I feel like have also changed in the last 20, 30 years. Wants to, it didn't used to be so much wants to. It's like, hey, that's where the job's taken. We're company Kodak. We're company people. We're Kodak people, right? We're gonna go where Kodak tells us to go, or where Owens Corning tells us to go, or Maytag tells us to go. We're going, right? And
Remember
it
IBM?
wasn't. Yeah,
IBM used to say, "For I've been moved." So yeah.
I've been moved, right? And now it's about wants to, and now we're talking to the kids, and we're like bargaining with the teenagers, like, hey, come on, I'll buy you a Camry if we can move to Des Moines, right? And then the second piece of it, to Margot's point, is that it feels like America's been carved in two and middle of nowhere, right? And what that means to people, like we talk about cultural, training and things like that, and we talk about it, people moving from other countries to here or vice versa. But this is very much a concern for people even within the United States who don't necessarily feel like they have a cultural home in certain parts of the United States. So there's all these challenges. What are your thoughts about those issues?
It's not new. I mean, when I started in the industry, I started in Houston, late 80s. So I dealt with the oil bust, and a lot of my clients were oil companies. And it was on the moving side, and they would offer packages for people in Louisiana, New Mexico, some other, think about like the outer fringes of the industry at the time, and they wanted to bring them all into Houston. And a lot of the individuals in Louisiana would not move. They were born and raised there. They were going to die in that state, and they were not going to go. That's the 80s. It's really not that much different today. You've got people that, they're just not going to move. They're going to stay in their region, and that's what they're going to do. What I hope to address,
really great point.
What I hope to address in the book is don't compound the problem by giving them a horrible package or not paying attention to it.
Yes. Because now the stress levels up here already now, and now
Right.
your ability to deal with the new culture is you shrink that. Yeah, that's a fantastic point. I mean, Chris, and this is why I like talking to folks who have been doing this for so long, is because the longer you've been doing something, the more perspective you have. The longer you've been doing it, the more the smaller the problems seem. Whereas the shorter time frame, the more up close you are to these problems, the bigger they seem. So I love the perspective, Chris. We got people checking in. Hit that like button. Get in the comments. What are your thoughts? Lynn Greenberg says, hi all, tuning in from New York City. What's up, Lynn? Brian Smith, great point. LS with support, lump sum with support. DSP is critical. Brian, but what about DSP for domestic moves? Is there a place for destination services for domestic moves? Chris, I'll ask you the same question.
Yeah, most people think that DS support is only needed if you're coming here from another country. I think it's more important if you're within the country, right? And let me give you an example. You're familiar with Dallas. My wife and I were moving from Texas. She was pregnant with our first kid. We were working off of Manana, over off of 35. So we started looking at areas.
Yeah, there's movers over on Manana. I know. I see you, buddy.
Yeah, and they took me over to the White Rock Lake area, which today it's a hot area, right, for families and everything else. In the early 1990s, it was also referred to as Heaven's Gate. Well, the owner of the agency was in his late 70s, early 80s, and it was a fantastic community. We went there and said, no, not a chance. So we ended up having to find a place on our own. We ended up at Highland Shores on Lake Louisville, which again is a family community, great for raising kids is where we ended up. But, it would have been great to actually have somebody help us with that. And again, I talk about when we moved to San Diego, an experience we had where the company paid so much more money when they could have given me a one-day DS support, and it would have saved them a ton of money in the long run.
Super, super interesting. Karen said, yeah, her husband hit the ground running and she handled the reload. He was super productive. Well, it's nice of you to say. I'm sure he appreciates that. Tom says, I had Amoco as a client in the late 80s, and the oil and gas industry was the main reason that LOS benefits and short pay agreements became so common. Loss on sale benefits and short pay agreements became so common. Really interesting. You talk about the different case studies that you put in the book, and some unfortunately hit the cutting room floor, and I guess that's part of the editing process, right? Somebody once told me that a really good case study or a really good story, testimonial story, is about talking about the problem, the solution, and the result. So in terms of problem, solution, and result, maybe what's a case study that you like to highlight?
I think one of them that I really like to highlight is a large global company, hundreds of thousands of employees, very, very frugal from an investment standpoint. So they looked at their program and they said, hey, we're paying too much. And they were paying too much. They also were not paying the right amounts of money in the right places. DS was not a standard part of their concept. Well, in reality, they were moving people from one part of the world into different parts of the world without DS. So you have these individuals showing up, spending 3 months, 6 months in temporary living because they would pay for temporary living. And guess what we did? We offered a 2-day DS support to help them find a place to live in the new communities. And they were able to cut that to under a month of temporary living. They saved millions of, in fact, that's in the book. They saved millions of dollars by putting DS into their program.
So 2 days of DS destination service eliminated 1 month of temp living.
Correct. Or more than that. Some of them were in temp living for 6 months because they couldn't find a place to live.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was it that they couldn't find a place to live, or knowing that they had that benefit and that flexibility, they just kind of like enjoyed it? I mean, because 6 months on the company versus paying their own rent, I mean, sometimes one of the concerns is people go into temp living and they kind of just get comfortable and they got no reason to leave, so you kind of gotta put a number on it.
I think it's a little bit of both. But what was interesting about this particular client is most of their employees were coming from India. So they were going places around the world, and I'll use Ireland as an example. So imagine somebody coming from India into Ireland, and they go out to go visit with landlords. That landlord's not going to talk to them. There has to be a local host. There has to be somebody that tries to support them. So this client would try to support them through somebody in HR who didn't know the tenant laws, didn't understand cultural differences.
Yep.
And they just sat there. Now, some of them would say, yeah, great, I'll be there for 6 months. But with this particular population, they didn't want to be in that corporate housing. They wanted to be in their own place where they could cook their own food and they can make it their home. I mean, and by the way, the type of temporary living that they have is not the type of temporary living that we think of, that's $6,000 a month. I mean, this was a little bit more budget oriented. So it was not exactly a great experience.
Was it more like a apart hotel or something like that?
Exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah, I've stayed in some of those apart hotels. Of course, the ones in London I stayed in were really gorgeous, but I mean, they're a little cramped. I mean, I love their coffee makers. They were great, the Nescafe ones or whatever. But but yeah, there's not enough room to to have a family or something like that in it. Daisy says my book would be relocation acronyms, the meaning between house of goods, destination service, and closed circuit television, and more. Just kidding, CCT. I don't know what that means. Do you know what CCT means? I don't know. Daisy, you have to give us a definition, Daisy. Jack's already pre-ordering Daisy's book in hardcover. Hey, I got a question. You're publishing a book. You mentioned the paperbacks coming out. Why do some people publish in paperback versus hardcover? I mean, what's that about?
It's the expense. So the paperback, the introductory price is going to be $12.99. The hard book would be about $175.
Holy smokes.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Interesting.
A whole different printing concept.
Rob Zeitz says, cola's not for drinking. That's funny. This guy's pure gold. Cross-cultural training, she says. Very good. Very fun. A1 certificate, it's not for steak. All right, Rob, we wound Rob up. We got him going here. Question for you here. If you are a CHRO watching this right now, what is one thing that you would tell them to do immediately?
Talk to your people that are relocating, and not the ones down the hall on the top floor. Actually go and talk to some people that have gone through a relocation. Buy them a cup of coffee, take them to the cafeteria, do whatever. And what's interesting is I started seeing a trend at the end of 2024, and this was on the healthcare space, is I was selling an RMC concept, and we had meetings, presentations, and there were actual transferees in those meetings, and not just the best final presentations, but they were actually what we would consider discovery meetings, where we were getting to know them, they were getting to know us, and they had transferees in the room. And those transferees were using real life examples of problems that they had and how are they going to fix those problems. So, the best marketing you can do, the best intelligence gathering you can do is, great. There's a lot of good people in our space, tremendous, dedicated people. Talk to the transferees, talk to them about the relocation experience.
I love that idea. I love that idea. Because oftentimes, I mean, how often do we get an RFP and it's like oxymoronic, right? They're asking for two different things in the same thing. Like the questions, you could tell they just took like a set of questions from this RFP, they threw it in, took a set from this RFP, and it's this Franken RFP, and you're like, who wrote this? What was the thought behind this? And a transferee being in the room cut through all that BS. They'll tell you what's important right off the bat.
Well, my favorite is on the RFPs when you get an RFP and it talks about tax protect, guaranteed buyouts and all this kind of stuff. And you ask a question, I read your policy. It doesn't appear that you do that. No, we don't do that. Well, you've got,
Well, what if
25.
we did want to do it one day?
Yeah.
Are you going to do it? No, we're not going to do it.
Right.
Okay. So what? You're just trying to get me to stretch over here. You just want to watch me do calisthenics? Like, what are you doing here? Oh my gosh. Why do we do this to ourselves, Chris? Um, really interesting. You've moved a lot yourself, and I'm going to ask you a question. We used to do top fives on this show a lot, and I'm going to bring it back for you, Chris. You've moved a lot. You've relocated a lot. Top five relocations. What? Give me a top five off the cuff. Top five relocation.
Number 5, Dallas. Number 4, Colorado. Number 3,
Well, when you say Colorado, is it Denver, Colorado Springs, or somewhere else?
Denver. I live south of Denver, so Denver Metro.
Okay, cool.
And by the way, this was not about the relocation experiences, the suppliers, because each one had good characteristics. Other ones had problems with them. This is about my favorite relocation, and there's a lot of reasons that goes into this. So Dallas.
So is this about the destination, or is this about the experience?
It's about the destination and the experience. It's about both, and it's
the experience
it's about
living there, or the experience getting there. Just so I'm clear. Okay, living there.
That
Gotcha.
part of the journey. Absolutely, okay. That part of the journey. So Dallas, young family. My daughter was just born. The Dallas community was great for us. It was absolutely wonderful. Denver was a different part of my life. I had teenagers at that point, and it was a great experience getting them from what essentially was a very small town in the South out to Colorado. So it expanded their view of things. I learned to ski. I grew up in the South. I had to learn how to ski when I got out there. I had to. I loved it, by the way.
How did you get your teenagers to move?
So we lived in Memphis at the time, and I'm going to date this a little bit for you. While we were living in Memphis, the school that my kids went to, they went to a Christian school in Memphis, and there was a kid that people have heard of before, referred to as Big Mike, was actually he was 2 years older than my daughter. So we went to the football game. So when you see the movie The Blind Side,
Michael Oher?
Yeah, we were actually at those games.
Oh, wow.
So now the thing that we found with any community, any move, it doesn't matter about the destination so much as what the experiences like were there. So even in a place like Memphis, which is not, it's not a major metro, it's the smallest area we've ever lived in our life. We had a great church, we had a great community, we had a great school, and that made that place really special. It didn't make the top 5 because every time we weren't at school, at work, at church, we were normally in Florida. So that's why it didn't make the top 5. But top 5 would, again, moving to Colorado, it expanded. My daughters were in the arts. It went from having 100 kids in their grade to now they had 1,000 kids in their grade, which can seem overwhelming. But when you think about from the arts, sports, everything that they had access to that they didn't have before, that was absolutely a positive thing. So number 3 on the list would be San Diego. My wife and I were just married. We met in Atlanta, married in Atlanta. We got married on Saturday. We left for San Diego on Sunday.
Permanently to San Diego on a relocation.
Yeah, it was typically it's going to be 14 to 16 months for the assignments. I worked for a company called Nortel, and we would do installs. So I went from there, and then the next stop was Honolulu, Hawaii. And we went from San Diego. Yeah, again, this keeps getting better, right? Now what I don't tell you is I went from Honolulu to Houston, which was not exactly the same type of environment, right? From there, and then top on the list would be Florida, because Florida is the one place that we've actually moved that we picked and said, hey, this is where we want to be. And we picked the Tampa.
Now was Florida was that company sponsored, or did you do that yourself?
I did that myself.
Self-directed, self-managed relocation. Okay. How were the choices different when you moved yourself to Tampa versus, say, moving to Denver or moving to Dallas corporately?
Well, you're paying for everything, first of all, right? So you're making decisions then, and actually it was kind of an eye-opening experience because I negotiated my real estate commissions. I negotiated the referral fees. I did my own deal on the household goods. I knew the mover. I wanted to move me. And then I worked and said, hey, what if I was a salesperson? It would be this price. If I was doing internally, it would be this price and whatever. So I had enough knowledge on my own to actually get this move for a fraction of what people would spend if they were, quote, outsourcing to somebody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Really interesting. So you were able to stretch your money, stretch your personal budget a lot that way. Yeah, really interesting. Margot says Chris has been places. That's an understatement. Yeah, good to see you, Brian Smith. Adios there. Yeah, super interesting. My wife and I moved something like 15, 16 times since we've been together. I'd say of those, probably half dozen of them were interstate moves. And I'd say probably 4 of the 6 interstates were corporate sponsored. And each time the move got a little better, a little richer, if you will. The first time we moved, it was funny. The first time we moved interstate, we were leaving college, moving down to Dallas, and we literally loaded up whatever fit in my Chrysler Cirrus, which is now the Chrysler 200, mid-sized sedan, and we went to Sears, and we got a car topper, the topper, right?
Yeah.
And we filled the car topper up with, the rest, clothes or whatever, right? And we just drove. And we drove through Memphis. We stopped, went to Beale Street one night, got out the next morning. We drove from Memphis to, to Texas. And my wife she broke down crying, like somewhere in the middle of Arkansas or East Texas. And because it looked like Little House on the Prairie. It looked like rusted oil derricks and dilapidated little shacks and, middle of nowhere. You don't see people. You see more cows than humans. And she thought I was like, kidnapping her to go live on a farm somewhere and churn butter. Not that there's anything wrong with farms. But, she was a city girl from New York City, right? And so each time we moved, there's always tears. There's always adjustments. We always get through it. She's gotten better at moving. The moves have gotten a lot better too. But if the moves never got better, I don't know that she'd have kept moving. I don't know if we'd still be together, and I don't know if my life would be the same, So I think there's a lot to be said for the way that we manage relocations. Super interesting. Chris, this has been fun, but let's have even more fun. You ready?
Yep.
All right, you want to play a game with me?
Sure.
All right, we're playing overrated, underrated. Do you know how to play the game?
I do.
All right, he's a ringer. He's a ringer, folks. All right, for those of you who don't know out there, the game has 2 things, basically. One, I'm going to give Chris some topics. He is going to tell me either overrated or underrated. Secondly, I will tell him if he is correct. Let's get into it. Sammy, first one up, overrated, underrated. Vertical integration.
Overrated.
Chris, define vertical integration for us that aren't as smart.
Vertical integration is when your main program holder, so I'll just pick on an RMC and call it RMC, and they go out and they start consolidating suppliers. So they decide to buy a mortgage company, or they decide to buy a moving company, or they decide to buy a temporary living company. That's referred to as vertical integration. It's not a new concept. It happened in auto manufacturing, definitely happened in energy, and it's a way to control the market.
And what is the challenge with that? What's the downside of that?
Competition is great. And when you're going with somebody and they're vertically integrated, you're eliminating competition.
Yeah, so vertically integrated RMCs would argue that they have more control of the process. They would argue that they get better pricing maybe because they own the suppliers. Independent ones would argue that they don't have choice, that they don't get to use best-in-class providers, that there's no transparency, you might say, right? It's funny because both sell, both sell on that point, right? Both sides. It is interesting. If I owned a company, I'd be pro vertical integration. As a supplier in the global mobility space, I hated it. I hated it because I could never get, no matter how good my service was, I could never get in.
So let's say you're an RMC and you own the moving company, you own the forwarder, right? You're a forwarder-based RMC. Mm-hmm. Knowing that there are no tariffs, there are no pricing guides when it comes to international. How does the customer win with that?
Who compares it? Who audits it? It's valid. Yeah. You don't know. You don't know if you're getting a good deal. You don't know. I mean, at least if you showed them 3 bids. Like, remember when Progressive came out, their whole deal was like, we're going to show you bids, but I think it was Progressive. We're going to show you our bid, and then we're going to show you Allstate, and then we're going to show you State Farm, then we're going to show you whatever, and you could choose whichever one you want. Of course, we'd love for you to choose us, but you could choose whatever. And they don't do that anymore. I mean, that was a thing. I think it was them that did that back in the day. And you're right. I mean, yeah. Super
I
interesting.
managed a program a couple of years ago, and it was a government contract. And I saw you post something on this as well. I don't see people talking about U.S. flag carriers that often, so it definitely got my attention. And for those of you who don't know, if you're doing government moves, there is a law that says that you have to use a U.S. flag carrier.
Yeah.
So what it means is it significantly limits the amount of options you have from a freight perspective moving international shipment. And we worked with this client, and it was, hey, there's not a lot of competition from a freight standpoint, but there definitely is a competition from origin, destination, insurance, whatever. And we implemented a bidding program where we would order and this is again where technology is awesome. We used somebody to do the survey. They completed the survey. We then sent the survey out to the moving companies. The moving companies quoted. They provided a fixed bid, and these were qualified movers. This didn't go out to 50. This went out to a handful. They would bid on it, and they would price, and transit times would win. There were tens of thousands of dollars difference on an individual move. And these are reputable movers. These are not going to the internet and finding, guppy movers. These are really good companies, well-respected companies, but it had to do with how do they route the shipment? What are their internal capabilities, even within Europe? I mean, we used European movers because we didn't use a US mover who would then book with a European mover. We're just paying markup. So guess what? The European mover always did better on an intra-European move.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't get that with vertical integration.
Wow. Well put. Well, unless they have boots on the ground in Europe, you could argue.
But again, you still have the bidding mechanism.
Yeah. 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 Interesting. All right. Next one up, Sammy. Overrated, underrated, single sourcing.
Overrated.
Why is that? Same reason?
Single sourcing should not be confused with outsourcing. Single sourcing is pressing the easy button, going to a supplier and saying, you're going to control everything. You're going to pay yourself. You're going to audit yourself. You're going to handle everything that has to do with our mobility program and just send us a bill. And once a quarter, semi-annual, once a year, you're going to do a managed report that's going to come to us. It is so expensive for a corporate client that it is and again, why you hear me and you go, man, this guy's really fixated on cost. Is he a nut about cost? I'm not a nut about cost. I'm also not an anti-capitalist. I think that, the truth of capitalism is the supplier has the right to charge the most amount of money he can for his product or service. That's fair. That's capitalist. I believe in it. At the same time, the customer has the same options. Single sourcing removes the ability to drive competition within the program. It also, in many cases, removes transparency.
Yeah, I think this is even more dangerous, honestly, than vertical integration. We're seeing this right now on the global household goods contract, the U.S. military, the DoD's doing. Right now, the DoD has been for a long time the largest single customer of household goods moving services in the world. They spend $2 to $3 billion a year on moving people around 400,000 shipments in a normal year, moving people around the world. 2/3 or plus of those are domestic U.S., but they also move people to Korea, to Germany, et cetera, et cetera. Point being is they have now sole sourced this. They won't call it sole source, they'll call it something else, but one contractor won the whole thing. So they went from 900 U.S. carriers and 250 international forwarders down to one carrier to manage everything. They have outsourced they are in the process of outsourcing their administration, outsourcing their technology to this carrier, outsourcing partner selection, outsourcing everything to it. And once that happens, the toothpaste is out of the tube. They can't go back. They've seen what's happened with Global Freight Contract, the DTCI contract. You can look it up, DTCI. They've seen what's happened to the sole sourced POV, personally owned vehicles, the cars that have been shipped. They've seen what's happened to base housing when they've done this. In every single situation where they've created a monopoly through sole sourcing, it's gone horrifically bad. And yet they continue to do it because they're driven the same way that corporations are driven, which is to lower their full-time employee equivalent headcount. They are looking singularly at the hard cost of operating a program and how many people, civilian and military, are running this program and getting that cost off their books and putting it onto a contract so it's a fixed cost. But what happens when the contractor fails to perform? Nothing. There's no recourse. There is no, you're in timeout, you're suspended, you're fired, because you can't, because then you can't move anybody anywhere. So then it just festers. It just drives me absolutely bananas. We're seeing our federal government do it right now, where they're cutting all these services and all these departments, and you're going to have nobody to do the work. And then when they realize they screwed up, it's too late. The people are long gone. They've taken the golden parachute. They've moved on. They've gotten other jobs. And all this infrastructure, while it may not be the most efficient and prettiest thing to look at or easiest thing to deal with, it served a purpose. And people who forgot what purpose that was are in the process of dismantling it. So,
and single sourcing shouldn't be confused in a way that it's, I have to take everything back in the house. I have to do it all myself. I think it needs to be replaced with co-sourcing. And what that means is that you clearly define the role of your suppliers. You're involved in the selection of that suppliers. I've seen really well-run programs that are would quote be outsourced to a relocation management company, but guess what? That client negotiated the transportation agreements, or they've negotiated transaction pricing. And they've gotten more involved in it. So it's just, when I use the word single sourcing, it's out of sight, out of mind. I just hit the easy button. Here you go. I mean, you're at such risk with that type.
Yeah, a lot of risk. All your eggs are definitely in one basket, and you can't see what's happening in the basket. Jack Taylor says the only way where vertical integration works. Yep. Okay. He's talking about. Andre says lack of competition eliminates innovation and progress. People are agreeing with that. It also has sourced agents compete for lower rates, boosting booking margin, but lowering actual service cost. Great for the booking agent, bad for the service partner. Super interesting. Let's keep it moving. Overrated, underrated. Consultants. Ooh.
Again, this builds on your question of, how am I going to do this? Who's going to audit it? Who's going to manage it? Something that I learned when I was writing the book, and I had dealt with consultants in the past, and I had dealt with them primarily on RFPs, right? And I was normally working, they were running an RFP, and I would work with them. And I never really appreciated, I think, what it is that they do for a living. But the good consultants, by the way, the good consultants actually create a level playing field for the suppliers. They work very diligently with the customer to identify, hey, what is it you want, customer? What is it ultimately? What are your objectives, and what do you want to accomplish all this? They give clear guidance on what the selection criteria is going to be. Can't tell you how many RFPs that I would work on, and they wouldn't even tell you, what are you looking for? How are you going to pick the supplier, the partner? I mean, if we're going to get married, it'd be great to, kind of go on a date first, kind of a thing. And I've gotten RFPs where you've never gone on a date.
There are arranged marriages. That's what procurement's doing. They're arranged marriage and mobility companies.
So there's an entire group of consultants out there that I've worked with in the past, and I work with now with Orion, that are the level of understanding that they have around household goods and tariffs and prices and their ability to audit are there. And what I would say is they're completely underrated. And again, the battle that they always face with the client is, well, why are we going to pay a consultant? We'll just do it ourselves. Well, you know what? You don't go to the doc. You don't try to do. Hopefully, you don't try to be your own doctor. You go to a doctor when you need help. Consultants in relocation are exactly the same. I think they're really underrated, and I think they need to get more time in their space. I think they could correct some of the problems.
I think we are going to see a golden age of consulting right now in general, but also in our space, right, as a microcosm of what's happening, because there's a lot of experience out there, a lot of wonderful knowledge workers out there who have been downsized or otherwise find themselves out of work. Maybe a lot of times what happens is, incomes continue to go up over people's career, but all of a sudden consolidation hits or whatever, and the tall poppy gets cut, and they find themselves on the sidelines. I talk to these people every single day in recruiting, and there's just, organizations are shaped like this, right? And there's not a lot of jobs at the top, right? Unfortunately. So you find some really smart people who are out of work, but they find that, well, while one company couldn't necessarily justify that salary commitment, 2 or 3 split could definitely benefit from them, So I think, that's how I started my business, and it's grown. I think there's continued growth in this area. Margot is warning you right now. She says, be careful what you say, Chris, about consultants. I will find you. Thank you, Margot, for the warning.
I guess I have to do a shout out and say Margot's one of the better consultants that you'd want to talk to. So sorry, Margot, I should have said that at the beginning.
Super interesting. Yeah, I agree. Although my favorite saying about consultants is we pay consultants to tell us what we already know, but somehow that has value. I go to consultants for my business all the time, and I've made some really good decisions. Well, they've helped me make some really good decisions that have really changed the trajectory of my business. So I'm with you on that one. All right, Chris is on a roll here. We got two more left. Overrated, underrated. The Florida housing market.
Underrated.
Talk to me.
You're seeing some short-term softness in the market right now, but the fundamentals of Florida are extremely strong. And I think if we don't get hit by another, 2 hurricanes in a single season, the Tampa market's going to be strong. But I think real estate is still moderately priced. You have no state income tax. If you want to get away from the cold winters, you got a nice place to go.
Can you get homeowners insurance? Can you get flood insurance? I mean, that's what we keep hearing. Everybody wants waterfront property, but nobody can afford to do it uninsured. What's going on down there?
When we moved to Florida, one of the first, we knew we wanted to be near the water, right? Who decides to move to Florida doesn't want to be near the water, right?
So those people are weird. We've met them. We know who they are. We know where they live.
Right.
Continue.
I think that's why God created Orlando. Sorry, anybody.
There you go. Yeah, right? Mickey's like, well, that's what Walt Disney did. He bought acres and acres and acres of swampland and built like a paradise where you forget where you're at. But continue, yes.
So when we moved to Florida, the first decision we made was how close to the water can we get, depending on the insurance. So where can we get insurance and what does it look like? So what's interesting is in the state of Florida, you have zones, and those zones determine whether you can get insurance and then how much that insurance is going to be. So we were in zone, whatever, D or E, I don't remember the exact number. You there, Ben?
I'm with you. We're talking zones here.
So
continue, go. Sorry.
We were 3.5 miles from the water, 4 miles from the water, and we had no problems with getting flood insurance. Flood insurance was cheap. It was not that expensive. Now it's gone up for the entire state of Florida, but it's no different than Houston or Louisiana, New Jersey. If you build on the water, you're at high risk. And
yeah,
who's going to pay for that insurance?
Yeah, it's just like Florida, man. Florida just keeps getting whacked like a pinata by these hurricanes. I remember when I lived in Tampa, the joke was like, oh, well, if the hurricane hadn't actually hit Tampa square on in like 90 years or whatever.
Yeah, 100 years.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's still the case or not.
Not after last year, yeah.
Yeah, I felt like it kind of got carpet bombed a couple times by some of these hurricanes. Yeah, we've got a place, a timeshare down in Captiva, Florida that we go to every year, and that usually gets the brunt of it, down in South Seas Plantation, and it gets hit hard because it's just a little island archipelago out there in the middle of the Gulf. But yeah, I mean, Florida, that's interesting because I've been seeing a lot of videos about Florida online. Of course, you always have to take that with a grain of salt, but it's eerily similar to the videos we were seeing in 2007, 2008, half completed homes and all these developments that aren't finished, aren't completed. They can't sell them for whatever reason, and you worry about, I worry about these things and bubbles and things like that. But there is something about living in Florida. When I moved to Florida back in 2006, it was about 9 months where I felt like I was on vacation. Every time I drove across the Courtney Campbell Causeway or whatever, and you're just like cruising on your little, work commute, and you got water on one side, water on another side, occasional palm tree in the breeze, and you're just like, I freaking live here. Like, how cool is this, So, yeah, underrated. All right, I hope you're right,
The other thing about Florida is that you have so many submarkets in Florida. So if you look at the Tampa market as an example, I live in South Odessa County, which is just borders on Pinellas. We actually moved from Pinellas to Odessa. They're building new homes and they're selling before they're even completed. So I think it depends on what market you're in, where you're at, and even Tampa. Tampa has changed so much since 2005. I mean, Tampa was primarily a retirement community for the most part. If you looked at the Tampa Metro, now the city of Tampa is one of the leading tech centers in the U.S.
Yeah, that's a really good point. They still got that barbecue place in Odessa, the pig, right on that trail. Was it Old US 19?
I know the one on the trail, which is in Pinellas, which is Eli's, which is a great place. It's open Thursdays and Fridays.
Yes, the little white shack, you know, that, yes, and it's only open 2 days a week. They're still doing that, man. That's like 20 years ago. I remember pulling up on Eli's. No, I was thinking of the one, it was like the Ozona Blue. Oh, that's in Ozona, not in Odessa. I'm sorry, Ozona. Ozona Blue is called. Yeah, this is great. Margo says, you like Florida real estate? I got a house to sell you. Rob Zeit says he's picturing me dressed like Miami Vice style in Florida. Yeah, I don't know. Probably more like War Dogs. It's probably more my style here. Let's see, Karen Gerba, talking HR, still talking business over here. Margot loves Florida. She's like, it's fun. You get to rebuild your house over here. It's beautiful. Tons of remodels. Love it. All right, let's keep it moving. Last one. Here goes. Overrated, underrated. Tarpon Spring Sponge Docks.
Underrated.
For people who don't know, what are the Tarpon Spring Sponge Docks?
So well, Tarpon Springs was the community that we first moved to when we came to the Tampa area, and supposedly it has the largest population of Greek heritage outside of Greece is in the city of Tarpon. In fact, they have 2 Greek Orthodox churches that are downtown Tarpon. The way that they attracted people from Greece is that there's actually a sponge industry, natural sponges, that was built on Tarpon Springs in the waterway. And so that attracted people from Greece to come here and set up shop. So the Sponge Docks is, I don't know if it's 100, it's probably over 100 years old, but it's a bunch of old shops, restaurants. And when you walk through there, you literally feel like you might be in certain parts of Greece, especially the food.
Yeah, the food. Yeah, the food's great. The tarma salata, and the domates yeah, it's fantastic. That was one thing about Tampa. They got really good Greek food. They've got obviously the good Cuban food, the Cuban sandwiches, things like that. I miss Tampa a little bit, I'll be honest. Oh, and I love St. Pete too. Yeah. Absolutely love St. Pete. But I would go to Tarpon Springs Sponge Docks. Actually, when I got married in St. Pete to my wife 15 years ago last month. And we got married at the Sunken Gardens in St. Pete. And we went to the Sponge Docks and we got 2 boxes of cigars. We got the lighter cigars, and I put a Ben band around them, and I got the darker, the Hondurans with the torpedo, and we put my wife's name around those, and we had like boxes of cigars, and people could like pick which one they wanted, and we, have cigars and everything, and it was just a lot of fond memories.
Was that right at the beginning of the Sponge Docks? It's like right on the front of it, not down by the water, but closer up in the front.
Yeah, there was like a guy like Fat Tony the Greek or something, and he had like a little shack, and he would make he only did his own brands, like that was his thing, And our Big Al, I forget his name, but like he had his own brand, so we sprung for a couple boxes. Yeah, it was right there on the docks.
He supplied the cigars to Laura Bush's wedding. So it's not just a local. He's very well known globally.
Wow.
Yeah.
I feel like I started that trend. I'm just saying. I don't think it would have happened without me doing it first, but who knows, Can't go back. Hey, I know we're way over time. I got to go coach a basketball practice tonight. Chris, this has been a lot of fun talking to you. It's always a great time talking to you. And, congratulations again on the book.
Thank you. Again, it comes out May 12th. For those of you that are going to be at FEM, I'll see you there. And thanks, Ben, for having me.
Can't wait to see you there and get my copy. Thanks, Chris Kline, author and growth and transformation leader at Orion Mobility. Take care, and we will see y'all next week.